So, Jackie, what is the weather like down there in South Carolina?
Well, Tom, I've been working inside all day, so I can only look out my window and say it is a beautiful blue sky day. As far as what the temperature feels like, I'm in an air-conditioned building, so I can't really tell you. But the weatherman told me today it was going to be a pleasant day of 80 degrees.
Up here in Connecticut, the warm air is just wrapping you around like a nice late spring blanket. It's just lovely right now. But I got a feeling it's going to be a hot summer. However, it's not just the heat coming this summer that has got us talking about it on this episode of 312, the HRP podcast. It's also actions on the way from OSHA, including a national emphasis program to protect from indoor and outdoor heat, and the beginning of a process for rulemaking of an actual heat, illness, and injury prevention standard. That is why I, Tom Simmons, content creator at HRP, are joined today by Jackie Baxley, EHS&S practice leader at HRP, to talk to you about heat, OSHA, and why you should care. Jackie, can you start us off?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so as you mentioned in your lead-in, this is a hot topic right now.
Nice.
Because OSHA has launched that national emphasis program. Those of you that are not familiar with what a national emphasis program is, it's a temporary program that OSHA uses to focus its limited resources on a specific hazard or a specific industry. So just in April, OSHA announced that it was going to focus its resources on these heat and heat-related injuries and illness.
So, Jackie, what does that look like for the people out there?
With this national emphasis program, and Tom, maybe in the podcast notes, we can do a link to the actual program so folks can kind of read through that and dig through that themselves. But in the national emphasis program, and in this one in particular, OSHA has identified those high-risk industries that their employees are exposed to heat. And I'm sure all of us can kind of think of some that would immediately come to mind, right? Like agriculture, construction, shipbuilding, even probably like smelters, sawmills. We can probably all think of those industries that we just envision somebody being outside and it's being hot, or somebody being inside around ovens and smelters and foundries where it's hot. So that all makes sense, right? But there's some industries on here that might be surprising to some. For example, motor vehicle manufacturing, apparel and piece good wholesalers and merchants, groceries, restaurants, letter carriers, lawn and garden equipment supply stores. There is a wide and diverse mix of companies on this list. And what I want to kind of make you maybe envision here. So I started my career in textiles. So I've been with HRP for 15 years, but young Jackie, as a baby EH&S professional, worked in textiles. And you want to talk about a hot environment. Yes, I was inside. And yes, I could go to my office area that was air conditioned. My one little office area nook was air conditioned. But if I had to go out and about in the plant, I was walking by these what we call dye jets, which if you can just imagine, if you've ever dyed fabric in your home in a washing machine, just take that to an industrial scale with super hot steam and super hot water. We had what we called tinners, which is where you then dried the fabric, and finishing areas where you put some type of surface on the fabric. So these were all very hot and heat producing processes. So in my role in the organization, I'd be out and about in the plant and then in the office, and out and about in the plant and in the office. But a lot of our folks that actually worked within dyeing and finishing didn't have that office to return to. Their work station was at that hot, tenor, that hot dye jet. And so there's a lot of industries and a lot of companies where air conditioning is not available. Think of huge warehouses. Huge warehouses, a lot of them are not air conditioned. There might be some type of ventilation and movement of air, but it's not always feasible to air condition these large areas. And so I think as you're looking at some of these target industries, think of that. Think of where we have the inability to condition large spaces, and think about the equipment that's in those large spaces that could be producing heat, as well as just our natural tendency to think about what's going on outside and exposed to the heat.
Yeah, it seems like a problem that, like, how do you even address that or solve it?
Yeah, so with any hazard, in the EH&S profession, we typically apply some type of risk assessment, and then based off of the risk assessment, you try to tailor or prepare prevention strategies first. If you can prevent the hazard, that's always ideal. And if you can't prevent the hazard, then you exercise some degree of control as much as possible. So with the assessment piece, it's things like, what is the temperature that folks are exposed to? Is it within, more hazardous, areas? How can we maybe implement some controls along the lines of, it could be something along the lines of prescribed breaks in control rooms. If it's at an industry, for example, prescribed breaks in control rooms that are air conditioned. So that folks are not exposed to those heat-prone areas continuously. That through that break, their body is able to cool down. They're able to get some water and things of that nature. So there's always the assessment piece, and then based off of the unique, position, the unique location, the unique individual, based off of the numerous unique issues from that hazard assessment, you then tailor the controls to prevent or eliminate that hazard as much as you can. And I'll tell you a funny one. Again, this was when Jackie was a baby EH&S, professional. Somebody in our organization had the idea that if we tied streamers to our fans, then people could see that the air was moving, and it would have a psychological cooling effect. Even if it was moving hot air around, just seeing the streamers on the fan psychologically made you think that the air was was cooler than it actually was. I can't tell you if that worked or not, but we had strategies such as that. We had cooling vest. So some positions would wear cooling vest, or we had a cooling vest that was available if somebody needed it. When I was in industry, we had water and Gatorade machines throughout, and we tried to ensure we had a reasonable policy for drinking and hydrating throughout the workday. A lot of times under OSHA, you have to be very relative to an employee health and safety. You have to be very concerned about an employee potentially drinking and eating in areas of chemicals or potential pollutants, because you don't want to provide that pathway for a contaminant to get into the body, right? Pathway through the mouth. And so some companies had very strict, no drinking and eating on the plant floor. Well, when you're trying to battle heat and heat-related injuries, you have to have a more reasonable approach. So have designated areas where people can keep their water bottles, and make sure you have practical solutions. And so, ensuring that maybe drinks are allowed in designated areas throughout the plant so that people have access to hydration. But you can put in controls like it has to be within a closed container. So a water bottle with a cap, for example, as opposed to an open tumbler cup or something along those lines, so that you're ensuring the employee remains hydrated, but you're not potentially opening up that employee to pathways for other work-related contaminants that could be in the area.
So I got to know, what's a cooling vest? What goes into that?
Oh my gosh, there is so much more advancement in technology in I don't know that if PPE is the right word, but just textile technologies for regulating temperature. And so, back in my day, the cooling vest was literally a vest we kept in the freezer. Mm-hmm. So if somebody overheated or needed it, it was, we had a freezer chest that was available on the plant floor that had a few of these cooling vests so people could wrap the cooling vest on. Some of the technologies that are out there now, there's more sophisticated vests that I believe you can actually wear for longer periods of time. There's fibers, some textile fibers that have cooling properties. I know, so for folks out there that only know me by my voice, I am red hair, fair skin, and freckled. So I do not work well in the heat. So I actually have one of these. It's a cooling towel. And I'm not a textile engineer, so don't ask me how it does this, but it's a towel that when it's wet, it has cooling properties. So you can kind of keep it around your neck. I use it when I go to the beach or if we're doing a long bike ride with the family. All you have to do is wet it and kind of keep it around your neck, and it has cooling properties. You'll see some bandanas along these lines as well. Even here at HRP, we have available to our employees little cooling bands that can go inside your hard hat. So there's some great textile technology that can facilitate in cooling as well.
So Jackie, we know who's going to be targeted for this program, but how does it work? How does OSHA determine who they're going to show up to and talk to?
Right, yeah. So within the actual National Emphasis Program document that we'll link here in the podcast notes, OSHA has indicated that while OSHA is on site for other reasons, they are going to look at hazards relating to heat and heat-related illness. And so this is how they feel that they can make most efficient use of their resources. So if there's an OSHA compliant safety officer already on site, maybe they're already on site because they're investigating a complaint. Maybe they're already on site because you were due for an inspection for another reason, or whatever the case might be. If OSHA is already on site for other purposes, they will open or refer a heat-related inspection if they identify hazardous heat conditions for which the controls are not in place. So while they're on site, they're going to do things like interview employees and ask if there have been heat-related incidents. They're going to assess what the temperature is that day and look and see if there's things such as, water and hydration available, shady areas, for rest and breaks available. So this is going to be a little bit more, I would say, almost an organic emphasis program. That is going to piggyback on some of other OSHA's activities on site.
So if you happen to be one of those industries or facilities where OSHA is making a visit and brings up these topics, how could someone prepare kind of before that happens to be ready for that visit and to have those issues brought up?
So first of all, I would say access our recorded webinar. We did a webinar on the 19th, so just a week before this podcast is released. We did a podcast that provides some tools and resources and templates that will really facilitate an employer as they are embarking on preparing a heat injury and illness prevention plan. And that's the number one recommendation that we would have for folks is address heat like you do any other hazard in the workplace. Approach it just like you would exposure to noise. Approach it just like you would exposure to certain chemicals or other hazards. Approach it just like you would to, lockout tagout program where you're protecting employees from hazardous energy. And that is to blend the principal factors of assess, prevent, and control. And so within your organization, assess the roles or the responsibilities or the task where folks might be exposed to heat. and might have a risk for heat and heat related injuries. Prepare a heat injury and illness prevention plan. This prevention plan should have things such as training so that employees can self-identify when maybe they're having some heat-related illness, whether that is heat stress or heat stroke or heat exhaustion, whatever the case might be. But the training can be signs of symptoms of heat-related illness and what to do in those cases. The training can also be on some of the tools and controls that you have specifically at your employer, whether that's going to be certain textiles, like the cooling cloths and things that we talked about, or other policies or procedures. And make sure that for new or returning employees that you've identified have this maybe elevated risk of heat exposure, make sure you ease them into work. You allow them to acclimate to the heat. Most heat-related injuries and illnesses happen within the first week of somebody's employment or the first week of that new job responsibility where they're exposed to heat. So allow them to acclimate. So work up to a full work day, maybe more frequent breaks, but allow an acclimation period, and you can have that within your plan. And then ensure that your employees drink, water throughout the day, 16 ounces, 8 to 16 ounces of water about every 20 minutes when they're in these heat-related conditions. You have shade, you have rest, you have appropriate clothing, and sometimes somebody's ability to abate the effects of heat is sometimes depends on what work-related clothing they're having to wear. So if I'm able to wear textiles, cooling textiles while I'm working, maybe I'm wearing my long sleeve sun shirt and my long sun pants that have some cooling properties associated with them. My risk is going to be a little less than if I am now in a level A suit that is completely sealed and enclosed, and it's going to be harder for me to regulate my body temperature. So you got to look at, as you're doing that assessment piece, what clothing are they required to wear for the task, what clothing changes could be potentially made, and make sure you have some type of monitoring program. That you can monitor and identify when an employee might be easing into a distressful situation. And we talked about training earlier, and that's signs and symptoms. It is super important that you also train your supervisors. Just like we talked about in the COVID days, the solid COVID days of training supervisors, that the days of coming into work sick and slogging through it are over. Now we want the supervisors, to be, more accepting of when an employee is sick that they're staying at home. So we weren't spreading the virus, right? It's going to be maybe a little bit of an adjustment with some of the supervisor and managerial staff too, relative to heat and heat-related illness and injury, especially with the continued stress on the workforce. But supervisors need to know you can't send somebody out on their very first day for a 12-hour work shift in the heat. You got to be able to acclimate that employee in. And also, if an employee comes to you and is complaining of a headache, is feeling unwell, maybe nausea or dizziness, don't tell them to shake it off and get back to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could be signs of heat exhaustion or heat stress. Ensure that person gets a break. Ensure that person gets drinks and hydrating fluids. So there needs to be, I think, 2 levels of training for an employer to prepare themselves. And that's just at the everyday, the every worker level, and then also at that managerial and supervisorial staff as well.
Mm-hmm. So when would one know that they need to implement these plans? When is hot too hot?
And that's a tough question, right? Because there's so many degrees of variability here. You have to look at not only the heat, but the humidity, not only the temperature, but the person, not only the person, but the task they're doing. What's their work level? Like if I'm sitting outside, in a supervisory role outside all day under a tent, my risk level is going to be much less than the person I'm supervising that's in the field actively digging or shoveling or doing whatever they might be doing. They've got an increased work pace. But there are some tools that are available and helpful. One of my favorite new finds is actually an app that can be downloaded to any smart device. And so I think this is a great app for supervisors and managers to have. They can start their work shift by looking at this and integrating it into their daily safety tips. But it is an app through NIOSH and OSHA. If you just go into your app store and type in Heat Safety Tool app, it is the NIOSH and OSHA Safety Tool app. I'm looking at it right now. When I open it up, it tells me what the heat index is for the day. And so I'm looking at it today, and I am right on the line of caution and warning. And what I can then do is I can then drill into that, and it will tell me the precautions I need to take for that day. And not only that, it will also tell me symptoms to look out for, for my colleagues. And if necessary, it'll even give me some first aid tips, should somebody start to exhibit those symptoms. So there's no one answer for when is hot too hot, but make sure that you have some way within your program to assess each day, what are my risk levels? Is today going to be one of those days that's too hot? So this OSHA and NIOSH tool, this works great when you're just looking at the outside environment. Because it's pulling information from the National Weather Service. If you're inside, if you're in an industrial setting, it gets a little bit more complicated, right? Because we're not relying on National Weather Service information because we're talking about the indoor environment. There are some pretty sophisticated monitors out there. OSHA recommends the use of a wet bulb globe temperature monitor that gives you a more precise reading, if you will, that can actually be related to threshold values for when when maybe prevention and control technologies need to be deployed. But those monitors are expensive. So again, it's not an easy answer. Just realize as you're assessing when is hot too hot, it is a combination of the temperature, the person, and the work-related activities. And as individuals, we need to also recognize when we might be more susceptible to heat and heat-related injuries. For example, I'm a ginger. I am very sensitive to the heat and to the sun and everything, and I know that. And so because of that, you'll never see me anywhere without a water bottle. I wear sunscreen every day. I do all those things that redheads do. But also you need to know what medications are you on. There are some medications that make people more susceptible to the heat. You need to be aware of that so that you can, address that as appropriate. So it's a complicated assessment piece, but that is, I would say, the most valuable piece is to make sure that as you are planning or preparing that heat injury prevention plan, that you and your team really work to see how are we going to assess when is hot too hot, and so that you can then implement those prevention and control strategies as appropriate.
Can you tell us about that proposed rulemaking when it comes to the standard for heat, illness, and injury prevention? Yeah, so
OSHA announced that little nugget back in October of 2021. And so in the Federal Register, it was published. It's called an Advance Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for Heat Injury and Illness Prevention. And so what this is This is it is a formal invitation for the regulated community to participate in the shaping of the proposed rule. So there is a public comment period. So companies and organizations were able to put forth their comments. Just last week, there was through Zoom, OSHA hosted a stakeholder meeting where organizations and representatives were able to participate and voice their concerns or their ideas or their suggestions relative to this proposed rule. So this advance notice, it's an invitation. It's a formal invitation for stakeholder engagement relative to the crafting of a new regulation. And it starts that rulemaking process. And so currently within, we are in the infancy stage of this advanced public this rulemaking process. I don't have anything that I can say we're expecting to see this or we're expecting to see that in there, because we are truly in just that very infant stages of a rule. But at some point, as this progresses, or at some point, assuming this progresses, OSHA will have a draft rule at some point that will have a public comment period as well. And I'm sure when there's a draft rule, we'll come out with a webinar or a podcast, and we'll be able to speak a little bit more specifically about what is required. Now, if I'm a betting person, I would anticipate that this rule would have some type of assessment piece and some type of requirement for a heat prevention plan or program and some degree of training, which are all the things that we've already told folks to do, because those are the types of things that under the National Emphasis Program, OSHA is going to be looking for. So right now we're sitting in this weird area, this weird time where there is no standard, but OSHA's looking at it. So how can they do that? Well, they can do that under the General Duty Clause. And so an employer under the General Duty Clause has the obligation to provide a workplace free of recognized hazards. So OSHA is recognizing heat as a hazard. And because of that, an employer should assess that hazard and put into place practices and controls to mitigate that hazard as much as possible.
So what necessitates a possible new standard or rule? Why the need to go beyond the General Duty Clause to do what's necessary to fulfill the OSHA's mission and protect workers?
Ooh, that's a meaning of life question. Who knows? Who knows what shapes proposed rules, right? A lot of times it comes down to the agenda of an administration. Sometimes it will come down to things that are happening around the world or catastrophes that have occurred around the world. For example, one of the regulatory programs that we have in our world is EPRA, the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, which was born out of the disaster in Bhopal, India. So sometimes these rules, they are, these advanced notices of proposed rulemaking or even changes to rules that exist, come through stakeholder engagement, come through administrative agendas, come through catastrophes that have occurred. And then sometimes there's some magic sauce that also gets thrown in, and then something happens because of that, or really emerging knowledge as well. If we were to be having a conversation, 30 years ago, we probably wouldn't even have PFAS in our vernacular, but now in the EH&S world, we have PFAS in our vernacular because we now know about it, and it's something that kind of the regulations are evolving with. So some combination of factors that bring it to the attention. I will say in the current administration, and in that stakeholder meeting that I attended last week relative to this advance notice specifically, They see this this issue, this heat and heat-related illness, connected with some of the other administration goals and objectives, specifically as it relates to environmental justice, because areas, highly urbanized areas without trees, without parks, with a lot of paved surfaces. The residents in those areas, the workers in those areas are exposed to a higher degree of heat just because of the way, it reflects off of those paved surfaces and no trees and no shade and things of that nature. So they see it as an environmental justice issue, which is very important to this administration. Mm-hmm. And they also see it as a global warming issue, which is also something very important to this administration. And so, no, this standard is not going to prevent global warming. But because of global warming and temperatures of more extreme, the administration recognizes this is maybe a hazard we need to get a handle on because it's not going to get any cooler out there.
That's for sure. All right, Jackie, I think we're pretty much wrapped here. Is there anything you would like to leave our listeners on before we head out?
Yeah, we've been talking about the new reg, the new standard, the new emphasis of the day. And, 3 months from now, 3 years from now, it might be a different, emphasis of the day. So whenever we have these new initiatives, these new standards, these new hazards, just always remember the assess, prevent, and control. Don't sweat it. Trust the process. Assess what the hazards and the risk are, and then tailor your prevention and control strategies to your specific risk and hazard. So relative to heat, look at your employees, look at their duties, look at their assignments and responsibilities, assess their risk based off of their work-related activities, and then design and tailor those controls and prevention strategies to best support your employees.
Excellent. Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today. For all of those out there listening, make sure to check the description, the show notes for those links that we mentioned, and stick with us for the Play Hard section coming up next. We will be right back with you. Jackie, thanks again, and I will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tom. Stay cool out there.
Everybody, welcome to the Play Hard section of this episode of 312. Now, if you are listening, I just want to remind you that Play Hard is always recorded as a video podcast. So in addition to the audio that we've put out, you can also see us on YouTube. And today I am here with my guests,
Christopher Labby
and
Keith Gandrillis.
And what is it that you guys do here at HRP?
Well, I do a lot of the field work. I'm the field services manager. I started 30 years ago doing all the field work. I still help Keith and the other guys still control and do a lot of the field project work out in the field. And we work hard and we play hard.
Pretty much sums it up. We get all the work, comes to us on our work order. We go out and complete the work. Anything they ask for, pretty much.
And today's episode, as our listeners know, is about heat and heat safety. And we were going to film this section outside in the nice weather today, but we actually had to come in because it was too hot, which is a thing that you guys know about, having to be out there in the field day after day. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like?
Well, like you said, take today, for instance. We're coming off of a cool spring. It's been a lot of wind. It's cool. Literally last week, it was 29 degrees when I got up to come into work, and boom, today it's 80 degrees. So, it's all that accumulation to the weather, reminding yourself to stay hydrated. It's always a challenge one way or the other. In the winter, you think that's the only danger is like you're dealing with the cold, but you got to watch out for the heat too. The heat can really kind of hurt you. I know some days if I don't hydrate enough, I come home feeling exhausted, like I ran a marathon. So important to keep your hydration levels up is what I found out over the years working outdoors.
Exactly. And we're keeping them up today. I am sipping on one of my favorite beers around here, Baxley's Ice Cream Man, an excellent IPA. Keith, what do you got?
Old Standby, the Twisted Tea.
The standard for Keith.
And I got the Fat Orange Cat Baby Kittens.
A lovely little bev. Yes. A favorite of the pod.
Yes, exactly.
Favorite of Cameraman Bubba, who is silently getting us back in the corner. Okay, so guys, tell us a little bit about yourselves and your background, kind of what brought you to HRP. Chris, I know that I associate you with Vermont. How accurate is that?
Well, I did go to school here in Connecticut. I went to Eastern Connecticut State University, took the geology program there, took the field school up at UConn. After school, I wanted to look for work in northern Vermont, and being the outdoorsy guy that I am, I like hiking, I like skiing. Went up to Vermont, tried to get some work into some of the divisions up there. No work landed. Had a fun year being a ski bum. Came back to Connecticut, put out some resumes, and got an interview here at the HRP, and here we are 30 years later. I'm enjoying it still 30 years later. Love the people I work with, love the projects we work on. Still exciting to work outdoors, love it. Yep.
Is this your 30th year here?
This is my 30th year, yeah.
That's
November
awesome.
we hit 30.
In November.
Yep, November.
Wow, that's cool. That's so cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, it's been good.
Absolutely. Keith, how about you?
I got my degree in mechanical engineering, and I realized quickly that wasn't for me, as I need to be more hands-on, more active, high-strung. I'm a very hyper person, get things done, go. And so coming to this project, and I like to get into different projects and different parts of the state you get to see, and the travel and the weather, and just outside and not stuck to a cubicle where I'd go insane.
Yeah. Oh my God, I know. And one of the things that I don't know if I've ever told this story on the podcast before. When I first kind of started at HRP, after I wrapped up my internship, I was training to be part of field services. I actually went out with you guys on a couple of times.
Oh, I
and-
do
remember
yes.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed that stuff. But
Doing some drilling, I remember you.
yeah. I remember I asked you to get pictures of me with the big long. Because like, damn, this is cool. I gotta show us off to people.
Because I had a story that this was like 2 weeks ago. I was driving down 91 North. I was like in the middle lane. I'm just cruising at like 70 miles an hour, and there's a school bus up to the right side of me in the right lane, and I'm all of a sudden looking at my rearview mirror, and the car's passed me on the left. I see a Camaro come flying by in the right lane, doing 95, 100 miles an hour easily. And he comes up and he starts cutting in front of me. Well, at that time, the car on the left of me started going to the middle lane also. This guy in the Camaro jammed on his brakes, locks up the brakes, almost rear ends the school bus. I'm like right in front of me here. I thought he was going to hit the school bus. Yanks the wheel to the right, bounces off the guardrail. At that point, I'm traveling past him. He almost comes out up into my lane. I'm like, 2 seconds later, he's in the right lane again, stomps and takes off another 100 miles an hour down the road. I'm like, dude, you just hit the guardrail. Chill out. So that was a nice intro. This kind of things you see when you're traveling.
That's true.
Field tech, we see a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah, Chris, what about you?
Bad drivers.
I know. I can imagine, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's always, we've talked about it before.
That's
the
dangerous part of the job, I
thing.
think.
That is a dangerous part of the job, just getting to and from the site safely, obviously, and watching out for all the people that are driving, doing their own thing and swerving in and out of traffic. But again, I mean, we've seen it all over the years, cold related. We're always digging for wells, looking for things. On the heat end of things, like I said, you got to watch. You got to keep the hydration up. We use tents when it's raining, but we use the tents over us to keep shade over us. That's a huge thing. You want to, especially a lot of our wells could be in an industrial facility around the parking lot, anywhere. You want to have like some kind of shade. Otherwise, if you're just out there in the asphalt, sun beating on you, you're going to dehydrate real quick. So a lot of times you just got to really protect yourself, get a little cover over you. If you're doing the drilling operations, we try to set up a tent right over the drilling table where we're doing a lot of the sampling. So yeah, those are the challenges of doing field work. They're definitely, getting to and from the site, and it's definitely weather related. You got to watch out for. The science behind the sampling and all. That's the fun part. That's where the expertise and the knowledge comes in, and that's what we love to do. But you got to watch out for all the other safety items that come with working outside.
The heat seems to sneak up on you more than the cold. The colder you feel it, the heat all of a sudden you get to a point of no return. You don't realize it, and you're like, oh no, I need to drink a lot of water.
Exactly.
And it's always trying to catch back up. At least that's my story.
Have you guys ever seen a situation where somebody was struggling to handle the heat?
A couple times. You see they get a little disoriented, just kind of sweating profusely, just being tired, dragged down from it. You just take a break, get some drinks, get some Gatorade.
Yeah.
Go replenish fluids.
I was working on a project up on a site in New Hampshire, and you think as you go north it'd be cooler, but obviously it's still very hot in New Hampshire. And my coworker definitely felt it at the end of the day. And that's what it is. It's a buddy system. When you go out with your coworkers, 1, 2 other ones, keep check on each other. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the middle of it, everyone wants to work hard. We got a great group of people here. We all want to work hard. But you got to take care of yourself and keep track of your coworkers. Because this individual, I could tell she was getting a little woozy. You start losing coordination, walking, all that. So I said, basically, your day's over. Let's get you in the AC. Cool you down, get fluids in you. You can't be out in the hot sun anymore. And then, basically when we got back to the hotel, I know she needed to take a break in the room separate before we got something to eat, just because the heat really got to her that day. So just got to keep track of each other, keep an eye on each other, keep everyone safe. So.
Which would you guys rather work in, the extreme heat or the extreme cold? You had to pick one.
This is a great question
that's a
for
tough
us.
question. They both are challenging.
I tend to like it a little cooler, but I'm not talking 70 degrees with a wind chill of sub-zero, obviously. But I like working the 20s. Obviously, we were just saying here in the Northeast this year, it kind of went from cold and windy, and all of a sudden now this week it gets up to 75 and 80 instantly, like a switch was turned on. You really miss having that in between, weather. You sometimes will get here in the
seasonal,
spring,
less humidity, and just
60s, 70s. Where are the 60s and 70s, right?
Yeah, right.
It's like boom, it went from, like I said, 29. Kind of how cold it was a few mornings back last week, and all of a sudden boom, it's 80, and we're not used to it. So otherwise we'd be filming outside today, right?
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not quite used to that quite yet.
Last week we had 45, 50 degree high temperatures, but also had 30-mile-an-hour winds. And now it's 85 out and a little more humid too. And there's no transition.
So in addition to like your own safety precautions working in the heat, does it affect the actual work itself in terms of maybe kind of samples you have to take, or the way you take them, or the way that the equipment has to be used? You run into that at all?
The heat, not so much. You got to keep the meters out of the sunlight. A lot of them have the LCD screens, and they kind of go black if they sit in the sunlight, so you got to keep that in the shade. And some meters, they have temperature sensors, so if they're in direct sunlight, they'll get elevated temperature sensors, which is not accurate of what the water quality is coming in. Cold is a different story, because then you have to worry about water freezing, obviously, if you're below 32 degrees. So that causes problems sometimes, and got to work around it.
Tubing has a little more challenge, working in the weather, definitely, and your meters, of course, battery life and all that. But in the heat, like you said, basically what Keith explained, you just got to watch out for the sun hitting your meters and hitting the flow cell if you're doing any kind of groundwater sampling that could artificially elevate the temperature. So,
So when it's hot out like this, or when it's going to get even hotter, what do you guys like to do to cool off?
Call in sick.
Well, assuming you're not working. We're talking about a day off. If you guys get those,
try to take breaks. Like you said, you usually try to leave the vehicle running close by with the air conditioner on. So if you do start getting overheated, hop in and cool off a bit. Use the Easy Up for tents for shade. Drink lots of water, which I'm not very good at. Not as much alcohol or caffeine. That dehydrates you too. So
if you want to be ready for a field day in the sun, for sure. On the home front, when I'm done at the end of the day, I basically live next to a cold river. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump in a river to cool off, or take a cold shower if you're already later. You don't want to do that. But so got to cool
clothing
down.
makes a difference too. You got to make sure you're dressed properly. Like I like to wear synthetics when it's hot, so you're allowed to wick away your moisture and sweat and everything, and not cotton that holds all that in and overheat you.
We all know the safety tips now from the videos, and also from obviously your own experience. So which ones do you find like the hardest to remember, or to stay disciplined on, or live with? Keith, it sounds like for you it might be
definitely drinking water. Definitely drinking water. I drink minimal water all day long, and it's my body's used to it, I guess. I don't know. Like he says, the other thing that we drink as little water all day as me as anyone else.
You don't drink a lot of water, but you still do well, which is great. 'Cause I'm always keeping check on you. I think that's the biggest thing that we all look over on anything. Sometimes they say you don't need to drink as much water in the winter, and I do a lot of outdoor activities in the winter. And when you're moving in the winter, you still need to stay hydrated, obviously. So I think that's the biggest thing. I think we all overlook. We overlook staying hydrated. I know it sounds like a simple thing, but that is the number one thing right there. If you can be hydrated, you're going to be able to weather it better. You've seen the safety tips. It's a lot more frequently than you think. It's almost you got to be disciplined. You got to be disciplined to keep the water intake going.
And be hydrated prior to the strenuous activities, like a couple days to get hydrated. You just can't just drink a gallon of water the morning of and be, hey, I'm good for the day.
Have you guys ever had to like work in, and not just outdoors, but even indoors, in a situation where it was very hot, but you also had to wear like full protective clothing, like impermeable clothing? Have you ever had to do that?
Not very often. You definitely, when we're in a Tyvek suit, it doesn't let any moisture out, so you just get drenched and soak inside though. You take it off and you're dripping, and it's so you got to take a lot more breaks and definitely replenish your fluids more often then.
Is that as hellish as it seems like it would be?
I would
it's
say
it's
yeah.
not too pleasant.
No.
I would say, like you said, you look at it with the way you framed it.
Yeah.
Basically, we've worked in some hot facilities before, depending on the what they're doing for a task and work inside and what they're doing for production. It's hot in there. You really feel for the workers that work in that all the time. And then again, we're doing sometimes work that's in a Tyvek or doing some sampling beneath a slab where you're doing physical work and all that, and it can be very hot. Yeah. Like I said, you're almost happier to get outside because once you get airflow moving.
Yeah.
Now, we've done some buildings in the past where there's, it's abandoned or it's off shift from work shifts. We'll bring in big, obviously, fans just to move that air around. If you move the air around, kind of cools your skin a little better. So that helps a lot too.
Like some place we go into, it's very sensitive to dust also. So we got to work inside containment tents. Yeah. So you have all your equipment in there, core drill, roto hammers, vacuums running inside a little 4x4 square, and all that heat gets built up in there, and you come out of that thing like,
I've seen you come out of those tents a few pounds less. Actually,
yeah.
at times.
I don't have much to lose either.
Can you guys remember working, like, what was the hottest temperature you had to work in, whether it be that indoors or outdoors?
I don't have an answer for that one.
I don't, but I want to say...
I try to wipe those things on my memory.
Yeah, right.
I want to say some of the hotter days were upper 90s. Obviously up in the Northeast, we don't get really hot compared to some of the southern states. But I definitely think we've gotten into the upper 90s. And that's the thing, the humidity levels we have are pretty intense in combination. So.
Do you guys ever have to, like, call it or not do the work because it was so hot out? Does that ever come up?
Maybe once or twice.
Yeah.
Where it
said,
kind
we had room in our schedule. We could push it off, let the client know that we're not coming due to the weather. And you let them know, and they're very acceptable of it. And all right, that makes sense. Be safe. It's better than you collapsing on my site.
Yeah, right.
We were not feeling the best on a particular site up north we basically had to come back the next day and work a little longer to finish the project, but it didn't make sense to push ourselves any further that particular day to finish it. So, we just came back and finished the next day. The clients are understandable in that situation.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You want to work safe.
So, Keith, tell me a little bit more about, in your spare time, what you're doing to cool off.
What do I do to cool off?
Yeah. Or just what you do for just in the summer generally.
What I do in the sun, I just kind of relax. Like go swimming, go to reservoirs, jump in reservoirs, and I go swimming.
Yeah.
I got a pool at my house, but I never use it. The kids use it. I never use it.
Are you like big into like dirt bikes though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That doesn't cool you off though. You work up a sweat. But, that's my joy is two wheels.
You can ride to a reservoir. Right?
Yeah, ride to a reservoir, jump in the water, swim off, cool off, hop back on, do a bunch more miles. There's a nice place, the Patchogue State Forest, that's legal. You have to have a street legal plate. And they have it's like a 70-mile loop that's through woods and little connecting roads to it. So that's fun. And there's a nice reservoir on that loop that you could take a break in and jump in the water.
What do you think is like the best part of it for you? Is it like the challenge of the navigation or the scenic beauty or something else?
Beating my buddies.
Yeah.
I'm competitive in that aspect. I like to be in front and start behind and pass them all and just have them try to catch up.
I can definitely see that. Yeah. So, Chris, what about you? I know you're a ski bum. What else you got?
Oh, well, you heard. So when it comes to warm weather, that's what we're talking about. Obviously, I'll jump on my kayak. I recently got rid of a sea kayak and got an open style, easy to get in and out of, sit on top kayak. And like I said, I love that just because you can paddle out and then roll right off it, play seal, paddle around the water, kind of jump right back up, paddle on again. So, so I do a little bit of kayaking. I do some road biking, not much mountain biking as much as I used to anymore. And it's funny, where I live, I have a lot of outlets for water and rivers and ponds and lakes. So when I'm biking, I might be that biker that you see with no shoes on, just jumping in to get cooled off. Enjoy playing outdoors and working outdoors. Definitely get out and play hard.
So I recently decided that I was going to, at 33, learn how to skateboard. Never been on a skateboard before in my life.
Great.
Oh,
I was like, you know what? I'm always wearing the skate shoes. I think I'm that guy.
I've seen you in skate shoes.
Exactly.
I thought you were a skater.
And I think I'm gonna move to probably to Hartford. So it's like this guy. It'd be easier to get around with that,
You
so
would be able to. Yeah.
I'll give it a shot, And so, I usually take at lunch. I'll just go out in the back parking lot for 5 minutes and just try to get used to it and all these things. I finally fell for the first time on it the other day. Didn't get hurt or anything. Just went right off the back. The kind of thing that if you did it wrong, break your arm or something. But luckily, no damage whatsoever. Just got right back up. It's like, okay, time to go back to work before I actually hurt myself. I pull back in, skateboard's in the back, go to head into the office, go to reach for the door to open it, just jam my hand right into the door handle. Hurt it like hell. It was like aching for like half the rest of the day. And I'm like,
I'm going back to skateboarding.
It's
easier.
Right?
It's just classic that you get injured worse just trying to get back in the building than you do actually doing the skateboarding.
That's great. Well, I know people that definitely get on, the agility and the balance on skateboards. It transitions pretty well over to snowboarding. So maybe we can get you out on the mountain with us.
I think I got to get back into it.
Yeah.
Or did you do it when I was a kid?
Oh, perfect.
Did it for like a year when I was a kid.
Excellent.
Our high school would like bus us out to Ski Sundown, which is out in New Hartford, Connecticut, pretty close to where I went to high school. Yeah, there was a cute girl I wanted to talk to at high school. She snowboarded, so I was going to snowboard too.
Yeah,
motivation to get you outdoors. I love it.
And then, funny enough, when I graduated, I suddenly lost interest in snowboarding.
Yeah,
but I think I might like to get back into it. It'd be cool to do that again.
I think you enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I know we're talking about the heat-related things, but I know people that don't like the cold they don't like to get out and do anything. But once you find a hobby you enjoy doing out in the winter, you enjoy just like any other season. So
yeah.
So good. All right, I'll have to check you out doing some skateboarding out back.
Yeah, keep an eye out.
Should I get you some early Christmas gifts and get elbow and knee pads? And
somebody should get that for me before I do some
put guards on the door handles?
Yes.
We're going to build a ramp out back for Tommy.
Yeah. We can do that. We got extra plywood.
All right. Well, guys, I think we can wrap it there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody, thanks for joining us as well. If you liked what you saw today, if you enjoyed what we had to talk about, please subscribe. And if you're listening, leave a review, 5 stars if you can. We will see you on the next one. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.